hear anything after you were talking about what makes up our oral constitution, and then it shut down on me.
Yeah. I think around the same time for me too. Sorry, but yeah, I think that's around the time I think I was rounding off, right? And ultimately, what I was trying to say, right? And I think what Hero was speaking to as well, right? And it's what is um, uh, briefly tacked on to the end there, right? For discussions like this, where hopefully we can develop the language a little bit more, right? Make sure to include the concise language that Hero mentioned, while giving us something to that's another thing, right? It can't be too terms of servicey in the sense in the case there's nothing to really talk about. Like if it's just a list of two like rules, it's not attached to like what we've started to learn is like uh, these deeper concepts around autonomy, these deeper concepts around commons, accessibility, in these type of things. Not to mention all of the indigenous things that we can speak to in the intrinsic part, right? Like if that gets turned into a sentence that in or a few sentences even that are all concise but nonetheless um, can speak to what each of us wants to add here, right? My obvious addition, and maybe those of yours as well, you would agree, right? Would be that indigenous um, uh, connection, right? But there's a whole lot of other things that inspire you guys to be excited about what we're doing here that can make up the language of what makes up our intrinsic uh, motivations, right? Whether it's the horizontality or the just the sheer open source innovation, these type of things, I think are all super valid to include in whatever language we come up with to spell some of those things out and for it to reflect um, something of us all, right? And or we can keep it broad so that each time that we go into the collective recital of it all, right, or the oral, events that we do, um, we can each expound on it, right? Expound on how and why it's important to the structures that we're all working and living in, right? So I think this is a part of, or at least a part of a lens that we can look at um, some of the content of this looking like, right? But yeah, I think it'll require some sessions like this to flesh it out, maybe make it a complete proposal. Not that it has to be uh, uh, written before it's oral, but um, maybe that speaks to leaving it broad or something like this. I'm not sure, but it's kind of a paradoxical situation when uh, uh, we're not speaking directly to cosmology or to Degani Del Hade or to our Wampum protocols. So we'll have to, I think, tread carefully, right? Which is why I think I started with that phrasing, truth, peace, power, and righteousness, seeing how that relates to language that we've already started to get familiar with amongst each other and incorporate that into at least some uh, uh, basic talking points and through lines for would make up a good, that we can see would make up a good um, oral back and forth, right? Which I think is the important piece. Um,
I have to go.
okay, all right. Good to see you, Haas. Thank you kindly for being here.
Bye, House.
Bye.
So, Harold, if I just try and understand what you just said, are you kind of saying like what we actually recital in the session? It depends how we kind of vibe. Because if you are saying some messages that doesn't really vibe with the people, that is maybe a little bit too deep and too stuff, um, you think that needs perhaps some adjustment so that it can really vibe with the listeners, or is that what you were saying?
Yeah. I was saying, I think it makes sense to to have some of these deeper concepts built into the the oral code of conduct rather. Um, but in order to have something like a point of reference, right? Without wampum belts of our own,
All right.
without oral tradition like prior oral traditions of our own, that besides these sessions, these are really are the beginnings of our own oral traditions as advocates, right? And so the things that we've been talking about over weeks, months now, right? A year, right? um, is what makes up our oral tradition so far. And there's a few phrases there that I was even resistant to spell out into whole sentences because, maybe they could all use wampums, right? Or all use NFTs of their own in terms of concepts around, what you see there on that end list of intrinsic over extrinsic incentives design, right? The concepts of regenerative commons design, right? Particularly to this open source context, right? Distributed power, right? Long term, right? These are all concepts in and of themselves, but they all also play off of one another, right? Much like that truth, peace, power, and righteousness. And so, I think this is a good example of what we could use to, build, embed these important concepts, that we've had in discussions, dialogue over the year, into NFTs, for example, right? As our symbolism, and then the capacity to read that symbolism, right, is what makes up our oral code of conduct. But there's also legal framework references too, right? In terms of what Juliet has taught us about how the importance of code of conducts or covenants when it comes to DAO-like structures, and this kind of gives us a unique on and off chain approach to this, right? Particularly unique because of all this native knowledge. But I think it kind of ties it all in a nice bow, if it makes sense so far.
So let me try again. So the content of the oral recital sessions, and those 5 are some of the topics that we could touch on.
Yeah, the if I understand you correctly, uh, these deeper concepts that are listed there,
Yeah.
can, and it doesn't have to be limited to this, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we can have discussions like this to add on to, and this is very specific to systems design,
Yeah.
right? I think that there's maybe there's technical additions that Haas would like to add, right? That speak to some of the language that has been so powerful in these sessions, right? Assisting folks in along flows rather than directing their flows, right, through the technology. Things, language like that, if we can find some conciseness for it and find a way to build it in, and so that when we do have these oral recitations, we can talk about these in these important concepts that we felt like are important to be a part of our code of conduct, right? Or our own oral constitution, right? For this context, right? I think the intrinsic concepts, for example, if that was spoken to in oral recitation, that can go a bunch of different directions, right? We can get into dialogue, some good dialogue about native modes of organization, but we could also get into some good dialogue around women's freedom. We can get into some good dialogue around horizontal system design, if that's what folks are interested in talking about, or folks want to get into more of a technical dialogue around why these things are relevant. All of that becomes a part of the oral constitution, right? All of those things that get discussed and all of the understandings that get brought up, which you would never write down, right?
So actually, what we've been doing for the past, well, at least me being here for the past, say, 5 to 6 months, say some of the sessions about system designs and stuff like that, they could have been oral recitations, or they are, or they were.
Yeah, they are. They are. There's no. I don't think there's any distinction in how that. Actually bringing up something that's actually kind of interesting to think about in terms of the native context, right? Like, there's likely no distinction in how those wampums got created in terms of folks nodding their heads in consensus, verifying with one another through the collective, right? That this understanding of this wampum makes sense, right? And this is how these very deep understandings of physics and astrophysics get passed down through generations. It's through the protocol of there being these recitations in place, so that they don't get forgotten, they get passed on. There's evolution to it based on circumstances and whatnot. But there's also something very interesting about the use of consensus to establish them in the first place, right? But there's very limited distinction even once the recital is happening. There's still a consensus process happening, right? It never really stops, and so it's this continuous consensus process around what was initially consensus around cosmology, right? And so this is where the language of laws that aren't man-made come from, right? Um, this deep understanding of the verification mechanisms of consensus, using the collective to verify that there's only truth being spoken, as much as possible. So yeah, it's what we've been engaged in these sessions. Very much is the same process of what the oral recitals look like, to your point. And so, yeah, I think that's a beautiful, a beautiful realization on a lot of angles, to say the least. Yeah.
So actually, it seems to me like if those sessions could have easily been part of oral recital, it's almost like now recently, or I don't know, to me anyway, we started having more conversation around, say, a more structured or regular or not formalized, but a more guided oral recital. So now we are just sort of, instead of in the past, it was all sort of free for all, or very, very, very freely how we want to talk about it. Going forward, we could just add a little bit of guide to that recital and add more regularity and frequency to that recital process versus the past was just like, there anything goes.
Yeah, maybe. I think those are some more specific questions for the Longhouse in terms of the protocol of law recital. I think we're fairly familiar with it. There could be nuances though that we're missing, just because the Longhouse doesn't have all of the personnel. For example, introductions can last a long time when all 500 nations or whatever it might have been for the hemisphere. We're coming together, and giving their welcomings and their thanks for each other, right? Days in itself. And so I'm not sure if there's like a difference in personnel. I think I vaguely remember the Longhouse speaking to like the speakers are usually comprised of not just one person, but whoever can speak the best uh, to the wampums, right? And these are speakers, taking up a very specific speaker role, reciting what is the symbolism, right, of the wampums. If there's not, the symbolism isn't there, there's still the oral capacities there, hopefully, which is the case for this longhouse, and not too many others, right? And so, yeah, this is. I think an important thing to consider. There may be, for example, the technical aspects that we add on to this document that come from Haj. So Haj should likely be the speaker that then we all then give reciprocal feedback to some of the things that he's speaking to that feels are or important to embed into our and it's not like this is a purely a Haas thing either, right? Or these things are purely something of mine, because these are concepts that we've all had dialogue and consensus on in these sessions so far, right? With our limited capacity to base that consensus on Gaina Rasa Goa and Degini Dea Hare, right? Through our dialogue with the Longhouse, right? And understanding of those protocols. And so we've very much been engaging consensus to establish what can be some of the first concepts for our own oral recitations. And, there's a lot built. We have to remember the sequencing of our own learning curves as well, right? Like the Gaina Rasa Goa and Degini Dea Hare have already been scaled across nations. Right? It's not like something up for debate, right, in terms of a precedence. It's embodied by us being able to speak to intact protocols in these sessions right now. But it's important to remember in terms of almost the non-issue of scalability that we have, that is quite unique. Right up until the point of implementing it on our own the nuances that may come with it. But up until then, right, we it's not like a problem that needs resolution, right? Which is I don't think can be said in too many other cases of folks trying to do similar things as us. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is to bring a security to the way we all feel about the new functional aspect of the Degini Dea Hare in the Code of Conduct as well, right? Because that's another thing that's a part of this document and part of the proposal that we discussed in sessions too. I don't know how many of those you were in, Julia. I think at least one. I remember you being there, because it's. I think we were sessions where we were really getting into the weeds of oral constitutions and the benefits and advantages of it. And it occurred to me, right, that Friedrich had asked for us to at least mention where we're getting inspired for all this native modes of organization, right? And so we added it to the Code of Conduct as is, but it's added in very much just a surface level way that, this could be a way you talk about your inspiration for anything, right? For any native group, and this isn't just any native group. Particularly, this isn't a native group that is band council or tribal council, where that's we'd be restricted to only mentioning their dialogue, right? Where with this matrilineal protocol intact in this longhouse, it's the only chance we'd have to actually make that mentioning functional. There's no protocols attached to the mentioning of any other band council or tribal council or a myriad of other examples where it would just be lip service, right? Which is not what we're doing, right? Obviously, we're thinking seriously, have a deep amount of respect, for the the technical and scientific prowess of these indigenous modes of organization, the sustainability therein, and all and such. And so, it also makes sense to build it in a functional way, in a legal way, meaning that our learnings, as we all learn going forward, can always be a part of what is a point of what is part of the language in this document throughout, which I hopefully you guys understood from some of these sessions as well, with the Longhouse and between us, about the native or indigenous definition of consensus is rooted in cosmology. It's rooted in that original law of the land, right? It's not rooted in the type of consensus that includes opinion in this sense, right? It's rooted in the type of consensus that understands and has intact these protocols and laws of the land, matrilineal laws of the land. And so the idea to have a point of reference for consensus would mean our own, beginning, whatever we come together with that's relevant for our context, the intrinsic, the commons, regenerative commons base, which could be our best ability, to the best of our capacities to make this context an extrapolation of what we've learned protocol-wise with core concepts. That can be a point of reference for our consensus, but also the more and more we learn from this built-in native dialogue, that can also be a point of consensus, right? Learning, for example, you guys did a lot of work on code of conduct, and one of the things that I want to mention once there's the active issues are back up about it, is the 3-tier warning system that is, a part of the Guyana Rasada Goa already, right? So already a part of these protocols for organization between the 5 nations. A 3-tiered warning system that goes through the equivalent of the organic elements on the periodic table in terms of clans when you scaled it across the entirety of the 5 nations clans design, right? Which gets a lot more than 3, right? As you go more and more inland. And so, again, all of this is to emphasize the scalability therein, and our capacity to, as we learn, reference this native precedence for social organization as a point of consensus, right? And giving us the leeway to learn it while also building it in simultaneously, right? Not blocking us from the advantages of that just because we're new to learning it, so to speak. So I hope all that makes sense too, just to name another important part of the document, but also hopefully speak to your point, Hero. Yeah. Sorry for the long-windedness as always, y'all.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah. Still digesting. So I just looked up what is Wikipedia. Wampum. Sorry, I'm so like what do you call it? Ignorant. So if I just read a little bit of passage from the thing, it says wampum strings may be represented as a formal affirmation of cooperation or friendship between groups, or as an invitation to a meeting, and their Iroquois used as wampum as a person's credential or certificate of authority. It was also used for official purpose and religious ceremonies. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, with the exceptions, right, of the religious stuff, and but yeah, and with a whole lot of context left out about, what that authority looked like, and all
Uh-huh.
the things embedded, all the things that we've spoken to in the past, right? That get embedded into the strings or shells or wampums. Um, that consensus is embedded into that, right? That matrilineal balance is embedded into those things as well, right? Into those titles, into those official processes that they speak to. And yeah, it's very much, what you've heard me speak to so far in this session in terms of the the added context, right, that we spoke to in the session around the symbolism in itself isn't what's official, right? It's the oral capacities, right, to read that symbolism. But no, some of that stuff sounded familiar, right? To the way some of the ways NFTs are already used, right? In terms of meeting invitations and some of the ways that we've at least discussed it being used for even friendship dynamics and things like this. But
So,
yeah,
so in a way, like, I guess part of your one pager about the oral recitation, part of it you mentioned NFT. So, are you sort of implying that perhaps an idea would be create an NFT that has wampum on it, and that will help us come together in a sense, if I oversimplify it?
yeah. Like I was mentioning earlier, it kind of really just occurred to me in this session, right? As you were asking questions, commenting, feedback. Um, the way that it's almost a paradox, right? In terms of how do you start an oral tradition with a written with a written foundation, and you don't, right? What you do is you establish these wampums or these NFTs that are embedded with these oral dialogues, with these reciprocal oral exchanges, and the capacity to read the NFT, right? That has maybe some type of reminder or record of some kind to spark the memory of those oral exchanges and those important oral concepts to get across orally, to spark the oral exchange that maybe brings new understandings, right? Like all of that is the wampum is first in that, right? In a lot of way, or the dialogue, and then the wampum. So yeah, maybe
Hmm.
this is a way to cap off that the document is to initiate the creation of these type of NFTs.
Yeah, no, it made me think. So, for example, do you know if those wampum change from recitation to recitation, or is it the same wampum that
The same,
every
yes.
every session
It's
brought
the,
up? They bring up the same wampum.
yeah, it's the same. It's the same. There can be additional wampums, right?
I see.
For different reasons and things like this, but yeah, it would be the same.
Okay, so I guess the
If I'm not
most
mistaken.
sort of the closest thing, practical thing I can think of right now is that for each session of the oral recitation that you attend or about to attend or have attended, for example, if in July there's going to be a recitation, you are perhaps given a wampum in advance. Say that's your ticket to attend that July session of oral recitation or get together. And then using that NFT, you can enter this place of the sacred. No, I don't know if sacred is a word, but is the right word to describe it. But I'm just trying to dramatize it. But like say July session of oral recitation, you have this NFT, and by NFT you can get into a specific channel on Discord, and you are part of that July. You can enter, and then maybe that particular NFT. has, because you said that each session, the one point is the same. Because earlier I was thinking, oh, maybe July one could be a different design to August one could be a different color, different design. But if you're saying it's all if the same wampum, then I guess an alternative could be the July one has that wampum, but has a date on it, saying maybe it symbolizes your attendance or for the July session. Maybe it's
Yeah,
your
yeah. I don't see anything.
yeah. Going.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that idea. You know, especially if it's within that invitation or attendance like context, right? It's function a lot like POAPs,
Yeah,
and I think Jenny and Haas have been speaking a little bit around. I think it. I think it may have been Frieger that's been working on NFTs and identity. Haas probably spoke to you guys about it last session a little bit. Um, because I saw him at least start to write it down in some of the documentation on the journey's technical spec. But and so that maybe there's some crossover there, right? With at least getting in some NFT creation flows and usage in the community, and yeah, the invitation context. The slight differences in terms of the dates and all of this makes sense, and it could be a nice thing to encourage engagement in a way that doesn't compromise integrity, right? With monetary incentives in the foreground, right? But yeah, I don't see anything wrong. When you said wampum stayed the same, for clarity, I was speaking to the legal wampums, right? Like the wampums that are associated with protocol, right? The Deganidi Ahade, for example, with the two rows on it, right? That never changes because it's yeah, and even yeah, even uh, yeah, you won't see amendments in the Guyana Rasa Goa either, right? Like um, the you can always add to the rafters, but you can't take away from the rafters. And they're almost speaking to a physical longhouse. Longhouse also going expanding to the planetary scale, but and so speaking also to those physical laws, how if you really know what you're doing, that consensus is really tied to this matrilineal heritage. There's no amendments in that sense, and even physically, it doesn't make sense when you talk about physical structures, right? To remove rafters doesn't make sense. Adding to them does, though, right? And so, um, uh, yeah, I think that it has to be relevant somehow to some of
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
some of the.
No, it's cool. So I'm just keep building on that idea, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
each time you're invited via a wampum, maybe, but then maybe with the date. But I think what happens after the meeting. And I think you mentioned something about the sort of reminds you of the session or stuff. But I'm thinking like if the NFT could be more tailored to what actually happened in the session after, maybe the NFT is maybe you have. I'm just brainstorming ideas, okay? Just give me a sec.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you're invited via wampum, which hopefully people feel it quite special, you know. Um, and then
Mm-hmm.
after the session, you are given a different NFT that sort of more maybe with people's uh, names on it or like their picture profile so that you can remember back in the future. It's almost like memory kind of stuff or photo of. So you have a snapshot instead of because the alternative. Sorry, I'm just getting a. The alternative is you have a generic NFT that you look back on, but then you don't remember the specifics
Yeah.
about that session. So I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to think forward, say in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, how, when I look at this NFT, when I think back, how can I, what other things on the NFT or around an NFT could help me remember those memories that we collected during the session? Maybe it's the interactions, maybe it's the topics, and maybe it's the
Yeah.
actual attendance of the people who were there present. And each time
Mm-hmm.
there will be different people at, attending different sessions, so that
Yeah.
NFT would be different every session, so that when you look back in 3 months time, in a year time, you can actually sort of have some recollection of what
Mm-hmm.
happened in that specific recital.
Yeah, yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be important. For example, if you took the four bullet point list that we have, right? If we have something that symbolizes common, something that symbolizes intrinsic incentive, something that symbolizes, the other important things that may be added to that list. That's one thing. But then to your point, there's also a point of valuing the live exchanges that they can. There should be no limit, right? I'm sure the native context, if folks wanted to express, for example, their a newfound friendship or even pledge something, and it occurred during this time of the oral recitation, or it was sparked from something in the oral recitation. There should be no limits to the creation of NFTs, right, from in a top-down way. I think that can really restrict us in harmful ways, and yeah, I think you could speak to symbolism, right, of a certain kind of attendance, a formation even that folks come up with, where each point of the formation is represented by one of the people, and it's a way of, without getting too descriptive, jogging the memory and things like this of important exchanges that happened, and it would be an open-ended NFT creation process for advocates to flow into if they want to. I
Yeah,
think all of that
yeah.
makes, yeah, yeah.
Am
Uh,
I am I am I helping, or am I don't know. Are we going the right
yeah,
direction?
yeah. I think so. Right. I think it's a whole lot. I was when this document, I was really hyped about just some of the legal framework implications. Right. That Juliet got me thinking about real hard. And thinking about code of conduct and their relevance to legal frameworks that we want to think seriously about. And so, the wampum and NFT ideas really stay limited to like legal framework implications and things like this. Because when we are speaking to NFTs symbolizing certain aspects of our code of conduct, we are speaking to our legal context the same way that wampums are speaking to the legal context of in the indigenous sense. But we're also, wrapped into that indigenous legal context through that functional, addition to the 201 and to the code of conduct and the proposal as well. And what you're doing is really important, right? Like there are a whole lot of songs that are good structurally, right, or legal framework wise, that they're good melodically. They're good lyrics wise even. The strings are good, right? In addition to some of the other important structures of the song. But if the ad libs weren't there, the song wouldn't be important. And I don't think you're doing a lot more than just ad libs. I think you're adding a whole rhythm section, a whole brass section to some of these ideas, in addition to ad libs, right? In some of your thinking, right? The invitations might be the ad libs, but the uh, there's definitely some strings in what you're speaking to in terms of real time recording of exchanges that happen during the oral recitations or any time during the experience with advocates. I think what some of what you were mentioning makes sense, but particularly to maximize engagement in oral recitations, right? Something that would be, I think, unheard of when it comes to code of conducts, right? Being built into the system design in such a way, in this reoccurring way, in a way that really tries to um, make concrete or make solid a continuous consciousness or collective understanding of the community values and things like this, and how to use it as a point of reference and consensus. There's a lot all of a sudden happening in our code of conduct that wasn't happening before. So yeah, the things that you're mentioning, I think, just add to highlighting this, right? The same way that those strings make the song and that those ad-libs make the song. And so not only should we be thinking about the legal frameworks of it, but we should be thinking about the sustainability of it, the culture engendering aspects of it, and the overlaps of all of that stuff with NFT waves that are happening, right? And I think that's a unique thing to tap into, and something that we spoke to at the beginning of Advocates without necessarily having all of this stuff to name in terms of a means to getting there. So I'm thankful for you guys being here and going through all of this. Not to mention, are you helping? You're making it a thing, So yeah, thank you kindly.
So did you just sort of refer back to originally? I think we were talking about the tracking or the morphology stuff. Are you referring to that, like the POAP morphology stuff? Is this
Yeah, yeah,
we kind of
yeah.
like come like full
Full
circle?
circle. Yeah, yeah, it is full circle in some ways, and it's kind of a good foundation to getting to even more expressive uses of NFT stuff, right? Even hyperchange, right? That we spoke to a little bit during that session. Really, it wasn't just lip service, right? Like it could really become a part of user experience in a different way than we're used to, with a different amount of speed behind it, right? To where you could embed it into the experiences and yeah, even before then, to speak to some of the things that you spoke to right now in the context of oral recitation, but in the context of just any of the experiences, right? In advocates, this is really, potentially a means of keeping a whole lot of our integrity while also engaging in what is got people's attention, right? In terms of NFTs, right? And really, most importantly, right? Bridge work for paradigm shifts around the way NFTs are conceived of, right? Because here we are finding not just community value in using them a different way than what is conventionally thought of, but we're finding a legal structure value, right? We're finding organization, specific organization mechanism value, right? And yeah, this can, particularly, right, just even in Wikipedia, right, which has a misnaming, of the Iroquois, right? It's the exact same people who we're in direct dialogue with, right? And even with the misnaming, right, there are some things that are, still just generally understood about wampum belts and about Onagora strings or wampum strings, from this time of the original touchdown of settler colonists, right, where they started to pick up these wampum belts as currency of their own, right? So you really see a move away from decentralized, autonomous currencies that they were, right? Embedded, complete with this programmed cosmologies into these currencies in a decentralized, autonomous manner somehow, right? Move from that to you know, you know, currency in a more diluted way, right? Which now Web3 has opened people's eyes to the possibilities of programmable money, the possibilities of embedding community values into your NFTs, right? These type of things are coming back up, albeit in its own vacuum, right? But when exposed to this broader history and the folks still passionate about the transformative potential of Web3, this is hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel type of thing, or an important hook for folks that we want to hook, right? In terms of something exciting, because not just doing it in a surface level way, right? In terms of trying to emulate the function of wampums in terms of NFTs, but to have the direct dialogue to help us continue to learn the deeper functions and the nuances and the advantages of programming our tokens in this way, right? And so, yeah. Thank you kindly, you guys, again, for going this deep as always. I hope it all makes sense. I hope you guys are excited as me.
Yeah, I have to say that it really began to click about the oral constitution and the meaning of dialogue and discussion and consensus, and that this continues forward. And so what we've created now is a beginning, but it continues to grow and develop with the community. And so there's bringing forth of the past, but there's also changes that go on as the community changes. So I like that continue morphing and growth of that oral constitution. At least that's how I understand it. I could be, correct me if I am.
No, actually, it's almost eerily spot on, right, Hero? Like at one point, and it was almost a tangent, but it really wasn't, right? The Longhouse, I think, feared it was a tangent by the end of the session, as they often do. Like, I hope we were talking about what we were supposed to talk about today, and somehow we always are, even though it may have come from a completely unexpected angle. It always is more than we can hope for. And the same thing was this last session, where it was almost for whatever reason, got into the paradoxes of Big Bang Theory, right? The problems with naming it as an explosion, causing you to have a finite amount of ingredients, right? Like explosions have, and rather than a seed, right, which also has an explosion, right? But there's regenerative infinity built into that explosion that is quite different, right? There's a quite distinction. And this, right, when it was said, clicked, right? Well, that's what's happening with anything written, right? Which is why these indigenous laws of the land, right, which are still intact, whether we choose to realize it, recognize it or not, exposed to it or not, that jurisprudence is still there. We can all organize on our own terms under this same law, and it has to be respected, right? Can't speak for the brutality that might ensue if it's not thought of carefully, but nonetheless, right, there would be international legal repercussions at least available, right? But the point is, with this oral traditional law, there's something beautiful, right, that speaks to your language, right, that you just used, Juliet, right? The growth, the evolution, that is infinite as opposed to finite, and that is ultimately what got spoken to about the oral aspects of law as well, right? The water that's involved in terms of the transmission of voice, for example, how that's different from from anything written down, and how that's important to the regenerative aspects of oral law, along with the collective aspects of it and things like this. But yes, I think a lot of the language spoke to the T what you were just speaking to. So no, it's a beautiful thing to have all this alignment, understanding, about long-term sustainability. For sure. Yeah, thank you kindly, y'all. But yeah, I'll let you guys be. I know I showed up late and holding y'all longer perhaps than you intended. So, but yeah, let's feel free to yeah, Hero.
My last comment. Um,
Yeah.
I think what could be amazing for this NFT initiative,
Mm-hmm.
regard to oral recitation, is I know who would be great in including in this conversation. But it's like people like Kaylee, because she's also around many NFT projects and many
Beautiful.
communities. I think her skills and her ideas in maximizing, engagement to this oral recitation, I think she can definitely help on that front. And I think what could be good is get together some people and just have a few brainstorm or sense making sessions to narrow down how we could move that side of things. NFT.
Yeah. Yeah, hell yeah. That's a beautiful idea to bring as many folks as possible, especially in the coordination side of things, which is always literally experiences miracles to me, because yeah, it's just I'm always at a loss when it comes to that scale of coordination, which we obviously would benefit from when it comes to. The collective engagement. So I'm sorry, it sounded almost like you got cut off there. Here, I hope it wasn't myself by accident cutting you. But
No.
yeah, this
That's
is
all I
beautiful.
wanted to say. If that's one area of task or things to tackle, not things to tackle,
Yeah,
but like things that we can get together and um, push it forward. I think that's one we can we can have those sessions with certain people in there and do it together, leveraging their
yeah,
skills and really just leveraging their skills and background and their
for sure,
intrinsic motivations.
for sure. And I was gonna say, um, what was I gonna say? Uh, I'm blanking. I was going to say, can't believe it just left me like that. I guess I'll just have to leave it. But yeah, you got me excited, I guess, and I had something on my mind around uh, uh, golly, can't believe it. Huh. I hate when that happens. Sorry, y'all. Um, uh, yeah, but yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, I remember. Maybe it's it doesn't even have to be a blocker to the active issues proposal. If once we get to that stage, I think we could use uh, some more input. Maybe I don't know. Maybe uh, maybe it is more rounded off than we think. But maybe it's an action item that gets that the proposal gets topped off with. In terms of coordinating some of the sessions that you're speaking to, a hero, right? So if the proposal goes through, then it means also that we get there's a green light to start coordinating some of those things, which help us with coordination of the actual thing.
You mean like what gets through, like the oral recitation, active issue gets through, then we can.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Then we have an action item attached to the proposal at the bottom there
I see.
that
Makes
that
sense.
kickstarts some of the
Makes sense.
kickstart some of those NFTs working groups. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exciting. Hell yeah. All right, I'm gonna let you guys go.
Okay.
Thank you kindly, y'all. This has been beautiful. I'm glad we got to speak to some of these things that I caught you. I was scared I was going to catch you guys again. But yeah, I was excited to get this across to y'all. And man, this, I don't know if hopefully you guys feel the same, right? A lot of this stuff is getting tied into a nice bow. A lot of things coming full circle with a lot more context, understanding. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. Oh, and plus 100 on the suggestion of Kaylee. Hero.
Yeah, I think, and the other one, I don't know how to say her name. Kylie?
I think it's Kalani.
Kalani. I think she's also good. I think she's also across many NFT communities. I just think like people like that would have seen a lot of NFTs, fancy creative stuff, and I think we can get quite creative with how we utilize NFT to maximizing engagement and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
It would. Yeah, I think it would be some interesting bridge work that emerges, and maybe some even our first test set values preservation too, right? If this is too successful, so yeah, that mapping will come in handy. Somewhere, some shape, or form that it takes. But yeah, it's exciting stuff. Yeah,
Cool.
You guys have a beautiful day.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Yeah. And Juliet,
yeah.
I was going to say there's a part 2 to the session that we had last Friday coming up this Friday. So
I'll be there.
Beautiful.
Oh my God, it was quite long last time. I think I fell asleep at the very end.
Oh my gosh, I can understand that.
I'm pretty sure it was more than 3 hours. It's just sometimes when he talks about like science, I feel like I've heard it already. Like he doesn't like Einstein and stuff like that. It's like, okay, fine. Let's not repeat that. Maybe let's move on to something more practical. But I guess like some people may not have heard it before. That makes sense.
There's that, and sometimes there's a change of context that I think it's almost like a musician starting off with the same songs to get into a groove, before you can expand on it. I think that's what
I just find it hilarious. He usually shits on Einstein. It's kind of funny.
It is pretty funny. All right, Sean.
Okay.
Right.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
You too.
Happy solstice.
Yeah.
It's the summer solstice. It's the first day of summer now. So cycles are important. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia.